she didn't even mention this. She just says, the guy grabbed me and kissed me and I ran out the door. And Freud says, you must have felt his erection against you. I've said he's a pervert. I've said this. This perception was revolting to her. It was dismissed from her memory. Well, how the hell does he know about it? Dismissed from her memory, repressed, and replaced by the innocent sensation of pressure upon her thorax, which in turn derived an excessive intensity from its repressed source. So she says, in the sentence above this, she says, when I think about this situation, and I'll just pause and say, I think it's like post-traumatic stress syndrome, basically, she's feeling. She says, when I think about this situation, I can still feel him putting his arms about me and pulling me over to him, and then he kissed me and I broke away and ran. She says, I can still feel that pressure of, it's still, she's got this vivid memory of him, like, grabbing her. And Freud says that that's not the memory she has, the pressure on her, pulling her over. That's not the pressure she's thinking about. She was thinking about the pressure against his erect member. Once more, therefore, we find a displacement from the lower part of the body to the upper. That is extraordinary gymnastics of the evasion for Freud to go through, of equivocation, I should say, not evasion. Freud has to go through such gymnastics to get the girl just has a memory. He says, the guy pulled me to him and kissed me. And Freud says, this pressure you felt. Wow. Freud mentions now in a footnote that there was this other case of this girl who came to him, and she was engaged to this man, but at some point during the relationship she went from feeling devotedly fond of the man to she started feeling coldness towards him, accompanied by depression, and she came to Freud for treatment. She says, why don't I love my husband, or the guy I'm engaged to? I used to. Freud says, quote, there was no difficulty in tracing the fright that she had. She didn't like her husband anymore, her fiancé. No difficulty in tracing the fright back to an erection on the man's part, which, okay, so that means that Freud's talked to her, and she finally has told Freud, yeah, he had an erection this one time, and now I'm scared of him. An erection on the man's part which she had perceived but had dismissed from her consciousness. What? So, the first part of the sentence you say, oh, okay, the girl told Freud about this erection she perceived and now she doesn't like her husband. And Freud says, that's what it seems like at first, but then Freud says that this was the case even though the girl had dismissed it and didn't know about it. She wouldn't admit it, she didn't mention it, she didn't say anything about that, but Freud says there was no trouble. There was no difficulty in tracing the fright back to this erection, which the girl doesn't remember and has no consciousness of. To the next page, back to the Dora case. Freud says, the disgust that is felt by Dora is the symptom of repression in the erotogenic oral zone. The mouth. Freud thinks the mouth is an erotic area. It's fraught with sexual meaning, the mouth is. The erotogenic oral zone, which, as we shall hear, had been overindulged in Dora's infancy by the habit of sucking for pleasure. So when Dora was an infant, a small child or a baby, she had been allowed to suck on things not just to feed, but just for pleasure. And so now she feels disgust at men's penises. Freud is either brilliant or sick. Quote, the pressure of the erect member probably led to an analogous change in the corresponding female organ, the clitoris, and the excitation of this second erotogenic zone was referred by a process of displacement to the simultaneous pressure on the thorax and became fixed there. So, when he kissed Dora, she had an erotic reaction. And when she felt the guy's member against her, she got wet. And these two things together, due to the reversal effect, made her feel disgusted. Alright, next page. He says, if I may suppose that the scene of the kiss took place in this way, blah blah blah, the way that if all this crap he imagines is true, he can arrive at the following derivation for the feelings of disgust. So he's about to explain where the feelings of disgust came from, if he hasn't already explained it well enough. And in a footnote he says, here, as in all similar cases, the reader must be prepared to be met not by one but by several causes, by overdetermination. So he says, we're not just going to find a single cause for what's going on in Dora's case. We're going to find several causes woven together. That is plausible, but it sounds very, very suspicious. It sounds like he's just, instead of figuring out what the problem is, and he's way, way off on the problem right now. She came to him and said, I'm depressed because I'm being hit on and my dad won't move us out of this place. And Freud is just going off on his own sexual fantasies. But he's going to explain the problem, and the problem, whatever problem he has now dreamed up and imagined, is going to be explained by several things. He's going to bring a little basket of things along, rather than give a cause for whatever the problem is. But the problem, as we've seen, is like his sexual fantasy. Alright, quote, such feelings seem originally to be a reaction to the smell of excrement. Full stop. Such feelings of disgust that Dora felt when she was hit on by this guy are a reaction to the smell of excrement. That's what these feelings really are. And then afterwards to the sight of excrement. Freud says this is the first place in your life where you feel a feeling of disgust, is to poop. And then the smell and sight of it later on. But, quote, the genitals can act as a reminder of the excremental functions. So, seeing penises and vaginas reminds you of pooping? Maybe for Freud. And this applies especially to the male member, for that organ performs the function of micturition, I think, as well as the sexual function. So you don't only pee, but you also put out sexual fluids through your member, and therefore it is kind of like pooping and excrement. Therefore, where do we get all this? He's mentioning how the genitals remind people of poop now. Therefore, thus it happens, disgust becomes one of the means of affective expression in the sphere of sexual life. So because the genitals remind you of poop, and because poop was the first thing that was disgusting to you as a human being, therefore, when you are sexually aroused, sometimes you respond with disgust and disdain. You say, oh, that's nasty. Because the genitals remind us of poop. I was not convinced. I was not convinced by that. Wow. Okay. Oh, God! Now, this next bit is just, oh my God. Okay, it's a footnote. The subject of erection solves some of the most interesting hysterical symptoms. Solves? The subject of erection solves symptoms? Get this. The attention that women pay to the outlines of men's genitals as seen through their clothing becomes, when it has been repressed, I was